Hello, this is Adam LiVecchi here. I'm excited to announce my next book, Sitting at His Feet, Developing Ears to Hear the Voice of Jesus. It's available now on WeSeeJesusMinistries.com. Just want to share just a little bit about the heartbeat of this book, read you some of the chapter names. Some of the chapter names are as follows. Since the beginning, chapter 2, Come Out of Hell. Chapter 3, What is God's Voice Like? Chapter 4, From the Garden to the Wilderness. Chapter 6, The Audible Voice of God in the Life of Jesus. Chapter 11, Hearing Discipline. Chapter 12, Hearing Hindrances. Chapter 13, There's a Sword in His Mouth. There's an interesting storyline on this book that develops. It begins from the beginning of time to now, the current state of where we're at as the church internationally. And I think it'll be a blessing to you. And there's something that I just want to share real briefly about the book. Jesus, he heard the voice of the Father. He actually said that we don't live by bread alone, but we live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That was what Jesus said, how we live. And so I believe him when he said that. And hearing God, it must be our number one priority, because before we can obey him or before we can love him, we have to hear him. In Deuteronomy 6, God said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." And before he even told us to love him, he commanded us to hear him. And I want to propose to you that hearing God is what empowers us to love him. And when we love him, we obey him and we keep his commands. And that the life of obedience is personified in Jesus, because he only did what he saw his Father doing, and he only said what he heard his Father saying. And so that means he had to hear God if he was going to be any use to God and to those around him. And the audible voice of God in the life of Jesus, there was 3 times where Jesus heard the audible voice of God. The first time was at the River Jordan when he was consecrated for ministry, and where the Father was approving him and affirming him audibly. And so the Father says to him, "This is my beloved Son." And from then on, heaven opens, the Spirit of God comes upon him. The reason that John baptized him is because John was a Levite, and Levites consecrate lambs for Passover. That's why Jesus says it's time for us to fulfill all righteousness. The second time that Jesus heard the audible voice of God, I'm not sure if they're in chronological order, but was in John 12, where he was in front of a crowd of people, and the audible voice of God came forth, and some people thought it was an angel, and some people thought it was thunder. And what's interesting is they were both wrong. And so without the mind of Christ, you will not hear God. And so anyway, we've been given the mind of Christ, so that's the good news. Then the third audible voice encounter was Matthew 17 on the Mountain of Transfiguration. It's also in Luke chapter 9, I believe. And what was really amazing about this whole transaction is the Father starts speaking, and what happens is the disciples fall on their face. But what the Father said is interesting. In all of the Gospels, the Father only gives one audible command that we can hear, and that command was after he said, "This is my beloved Son," he said this, "Hear him." And so the Father's number one priority is that we would hear his Son. The Father knows everything. He knows times and seasons are in his hand. He knows everything about everything, no matter what. He has no need outside of himself. He's omniscient, omnipresent. He's timeless. He's outside of time and space. He's God. And he had one thing to say. And what he had to say was, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." And the Father's number one priority is that we would be attentive and we would hear his Son. And in hearing him, we would obey him and we would be empowered to love him. And that love is expressed through our obedience. And so I just encourage you to get your hands on Sitting at his Feet, Developing Ears to Hear the Voice of Jesus. It'll be a blessing to your life, and it'll give you some practical stuff about hindrances and things that hinder us from hearing God. And it'll also give you some positive stuff on how to position yourself and how to create an atmosphere in your life that's conducive to God speaking. So I encourage you to get your hands on Sitting at his Feet. It's available on WeSeeJesusMinistries.com on the store page. Thanks for your time.